The Caretaker of Tree Palace by C. Don McCallum. Chapter 5 Air. The boy. Well, isn't that a nice one? The old woman turned the page of Doodle's notebook and looked at the lines of graphite drawn into life like forms of shadow and light. He kneeled by her side, seeing his notebook through her eyes, looking up at her. I love how the birds just pop out off the page. It's as if I could drop a worm into one of those little birds' mouths right now. I can almost hear their sweet little chirps. Cheep, cheep, she squeaked. He snorted out a breath in something akin to laughter. These were over in our woods, she looked at him. Her eyes smiled, and he nodded. You know your mother named those woods. She seemed to wait for a response. Yes, he knew this story already, but he wanted to hear it again. Tree Palace, she called it. She took one step on those trails, and it was as if she was transported to a different time. The cedar elms, evergreens, and other little trees in there faded into walls of a great castle. You could almost see the tapestries of boys' dark lining the walls and floors. Your mother would stroll through those halls like a regal lady in the king's court, the queen herself even. A burst of laughter came up from the old woman's belly. The ripple of joy seemed vaguely familiar. Then sadness washed over her face, and she looked at him smiling at her talking about his mother. She was regal, wasn't she? He nodded, smiled. That woman had a glow about her as if she wore a coat of gems, as if angels powdered her skin with a golden dust. Oh, and you should have seen her when she was pregnant with you, John. That old-time feeling laughter rolled through her again. I didn't need anybody to tell me she was expecting. No, sir, I saw it in her eyes. She paused as to remember. No, and how she shined. The old woman pulled her hand away from the notebook of drawings and stroked his hair. She sure did love her baby boy. He could feel his hair rolled and twisted between her knotty fingers. I remember one time, Lord, that girl was tired. She was holding you in her arms, sitting in the dark and rocking you, right there in that chair. An old chair sat near the window. The last rays of sunshine cast a golden glow on the rocker across the room. You were so tiny up against her chest. Well, it was late at night, and you weren't feeling well. Not feeling well at all. Just crying and crying. You couldn't get any rest. But she sat in here, rocked you in the dark, and just hummed. Sometimes I came in here to listen, trying not to make my presence known. Winking at him, she smiled. She had the prettiest voice, sweet like these morning doves you drew. Her wrinkled hand patted, then rubbed the notebook cover. You know, it's funny. She looked around the room, then closed her eyes. A slight frown came over her face. It's funny how I know that this room was dark when I heard her humming to you that night. But when I close my eyes now and remember seeing her there, holding you. She paused, seeing that night again. Somehow it seems like the room was full light. She sighed deeply and opened her eyes again. How about you running over to turn that light on? I want to see what I'm looking at. Doodles ran over to the light switch, and she opened the book and turned the page. Well, she picked the right nickname for you, didn't she? Ever since you could hold one of those big pencils, you were writing on things. Boy, you wrote on everything. In books, on walls, on furniture. I saw you one time trying to write on a leaf your mama and you found outside. Anything that wasn't moving, you scribbled on it. Yeah, she picked you out the right name. She turned the page. Doodles. That's you all right. Page after page, his grandmother's praise at the beauty that came from his hands, his mind, his heart. How could such a youngster draw something so full of life just with a pencil? She asked in obvious wonder. Her voice faded. He knew more words wanted to come. She drew a shallow, raspy breath. She talked often about how tired she was, how bone tired. It was as if her lungs, her mind, and her heart were winding down like the fading sunlight outside. He wished he could go turn on the light that would bring the life back into her body, but he was old enough to know that there wasn't any such switch, at least none within a boy's reach, or anybody else's to control. So she looked at him, then the pictures in his tattered notebook. Goodbye was a word that couldn't get to her lips, even though she knew her eyes said it. She would have cried if she'd been younger, but she'd cried herself out of tears for herself a long time ago. Goodbye, goodbye. She didn't want to say it, and she didn't want to see it either. She was sick of goodbyes. It would be time soon enough. She looked into his eyes with the hunger of a little bird. He sat there by her side for a long time, listening to her stories, watching her as she looked at his notebook. He sat there with his heart wide open, ready to be filled. The birds. The first of the fledglings to test his wings hopped to the branch. Nearness, Gentle said to him as much as she said to his brother, Comely. The movement comes from your heart. The little bird's wings bent out and up, grabbing for the wind but not finding a lift. Feel it in your heart, Nearness. Gentle could see just where the trouble was. He was thinking about flying instead of just feeling it. First you feel it in your heart, Winsome said, then let your head imagine it. Nearness seemed to consider his instruction. He moved to the edge and lifted his little chest. Gentle's own chest puffed with pride for her young one. She remembered her first flight. She was the first out of the nest. How she was sure she would fly to the top of the tree, then swoop down and pick up a berry from a bush to feed to her siblings. But that wasn't how it worked. She fell beak flat and didn't wake up for a few moments. She remembered the terror of not moving, then hearing her parents' soothing words. This isn't a time for fear, little one. Gentle stroked him with her wing tip. When you feel it in your heart and your head has imagined it, lift your wings onto the wind. Trust. Nearness lifted his chest, closed his eyes tight, and extended his wings, flapping them in and out, up and down. It wasn't flight yet, but he was learning. And when you're ready, Gentle coaxed, step out onto the air. She held her breath. This was the moment she dreaded, the moment when her little one might fall. How many sweet dovelings had she and Winsome guided to the wind? How many had flown? And how many had perished? She looked at the joy in her nearness and knew he could do it. His wings were ready to try to fly, but first he must try. The little bird stretched his neck to hold his head higher. He lifted his wings over and over again, trying out the movement. Am I doing it, Mama? I think I feel it in my heart. Like this, brother. Comely chirped. Gentle and Winsome turned. The other little one stood tall with a big grin on his beak. His pretty wings twittered. Do it like this. He was ready to try his own wings. Yet he cheered his sibling on with a happy singing. Go on, Nearness. You can do it. Fly, Nearness, fly. Confidence grew with every practice run through. Nearness was almost ready. I'm going to do it. I'm going to step off and fly, just like Papa. Gentle glanced at her mate. He never showed his concern to the fledglings, only certainty that both of them would fly, but she knew him better. He was just as worried as she. Why did little ones ever have to leave the nest anyway? There was safety in the nest. On the ground, there was danger. She scanned the woods, then looked back. It was time. Whenever you're ready, little one, Winsome said, full of pride. In one final run through the movements, Nearness lifted his chest as to fill his heart with the desire to fly. He shut his eyes tight like he imagined the wind lifting him. Her baby flapped his wings, then stepped off of the branch. For an instant, he held himself on the air. His little body hung under his frail new wings. I'm flying, he chirped. Look at me. I'm flying. But he went nowhere. He looked toward the nest with a smirk, then started a straight to the earth descent. Og, Comely leaned over the nest. You're falling. You're falling. Flap, brother, flap. But Nearness dropped to the ground with a thud. All were silent, stunned. Nearness lay perfectly still and quiet. Gentle hopped to the nest and cooed. Winsome alighted down to his little one. Gentle tried to keep her heart from leaping out of her chest. This was always the hardest part. The hardest part. She wanted to be by his side, but her place was in the nest with her Comely. He breathes. He is unharmed, Winsome called. Oh, merciful ground, she cooed. See, Comely? He did very well. You will do just as well when it's your time." Gentle's words were sweet, but her heart pounded in her chest. Her wings were weak. Comely looked at her then over the sides of the nest at his brother and Papa. "Mama, I won't fall. I'll be great. I'll fly the first time." He nodded as if to get her to agree. "It's true, Mama. It really is." Gentle smiled. "I know you will do your best, sweet one. That will be enough, whether you fly or fall." She was right, and it would be his chance soon. He was so excited about trying his wings, but scared too, she knew. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to fly, and I will do it on my first try," he sang. He looked over the nest edge again. "Hear that, brother? Come on, wake up and watch me." Then over the chatter of the fledgling at her side, Gentle heard Winsome's cry. "Danger!" Immediately she scanned the woods again. Danger? Where? Now she knew her heart would leap out of her chest. Where? Then she saw it and held her breath. Low to the ground, Bobcat crawled. Its brown coat blended in perfectly with the ground as it stalked right toward her baby, one foot in front of another, silent on the cedar padding. Without thinking, Gentle flew down to Nearness and Winsome. She put herself between them and the stalking cat. Wailing her shrillest cry, she lifted herself on the air. "I am strong and fast," she sang. "Stay away, Bobcat." Winsome said, hopping to her side, "We have scratching claws and sharp beaks." Behind, Nearness trembled. His wings were too weak to help in this battle. He froze in his place and awaited his fate as only he could. "Scree, scree," he cried. Bobcat didn't speak. The cat just let out a low hiss and bared its teeth. No words could speak more clearly than that. He made his slow crawl through the stickered ivy towards her baby bird. His eyes locked onto Nearness. The little one cried out, "Scree, scree, heart, I want to fly." But his heart did not seem to hear. "Wings, pull me up," he flapped furiously, but they did not budge him off the ground. "Someone please help me." Gentle and Winsome darted forward to the approaching cat, clawing at his eyes, yet fluttering to stay out of his reach. "Beloved, peck out his eyes, but be careful not to be clawed." Then out of the corner of her eye, Gentle saw a movement in the ivy. Bobcat saw it too, for he stopped and stared intently. A king snake stirred the rambling green vines. It slithered close, too close, then away from Bobcat, but not fast enough. Bobcat turned his claws to the snake almost under his paws and pounced. The snake flipped from side to side in the jaws of Bobcat. With the cat distracted by its prey, the two mourning doves flew back to Nearness' side. "Fly, Nearness," Comely sang above them. "Fly for your life." "Feel it in your heart," Gentle and Winsome cooed from both sides. "Clear your fear. Imagine flight." As Gentle spoke, she turned Nearness away from the bobcat, away from the snake, and towards the quiet of the woods. "Feel it, imagine it, fly," Winsome sang into his ears. Catching on to the beauty of the melody and the freedom that it brought, Nearness lifted his chest. He seemed to let the fear melt away and the joy fill his heart. He looked up to the nest where his brother cheered him on. Without thinking, he lifted his wings and jumped onto the wind. He flew. On the wind he flew. He was flying. The danger remained behind him on the earthbound floor. Nearness flew. Then he was safe in the arms of the nesting tree, surrounded by the ones he loved. "Sorry you fell, brother." Comely nestled his head under his brother's wing. "You'll do better. Why, you probably won't fall at all," Nearness sang, a little winded. "Yes, that's what I was telling Mama." Thank you for listening to The Caretaker of Tree Palace by C. Don McCallum. If you're enjoying this story, please consider sharing it with someone you know. And please like the video and subscribe to this channel to help others discover these stories.